Hello and welcome back to another UCL Fantasy Team Selection video. Today we're taking a look at match day 12. If you haven't already had a watch of the ultimate guide that we put out yesterday, I definitely would go and recommend that if you are a little bit confused on what to do with your transfers, because we've got absolutely everything that you are going to need for match day 12 in that video. Today we're more focusing on my team and the transfers that I'm going to be making. Basically for the entire week already so far, I have had my 3 transfers locked in, but there has been some news that has came out this morning that is kind of making things a little bit more difficult, and it is kind of forcing me into transfers that I maybe didn't want to make in the first place. So there is going to be a lot of talk over some potential moves, but firstly, of course, looking back at match day 11, and unfortunately it was another red arrow for me, despite actually it not being that bad of a week. I think it was another 4k red arrow. I think I was about 17,000th before, which I think now marks about the 6th red arrow in a row for me after such a good start. I think I was sitting about 3k after about match day 6, and now it's just been, red arrow, red arrow, red arrow, and I seem to be dropping about 4,000 places every single match day. So we're now down to 21,000th, which is very unfortunate, but we still have a long way to go. We've obviously just in the round of 16, so there's still, a good 7 match days until the end of the season. Obviously, we picked a couple of players in there that were going to be a little bit more differential. The likes of Dani Olmo wasn't really a big pick for Barcelona. Obviously, with Kubarsi's red card, that ended up being a little bit of a stinker with him being hooked after about half an hour. Again, we did go all out basically on Barcelona with Szczesny, Rafinha, Olmo and Lewandowski, and that red card did obviously play a big part in them not really getting too many points. Rafinha still got the 9-pointer, which was ideal. I do think Szczesny was robbed of that man of the match, so that was 3 points that I really should have got there. But what can you really do? Differential in Adeyemi was nice with the 9-pointer. Obviously we had Guirassy on the bench. He was captaincy for day 1, only a 2-pointer along with Mbappe, which wasn't great. Michele ended up scoring an own goal. He was one of the big differentials that ended up going for in the end, so he wasn't too ideal either. So the big benefit there was the Inter defence, who kept a clean sheet against Feyenoord. Kind of wish I went a little bit more into those guys. I went Bastoni and Dumfries. Kind of wish I had a third player in there, but not the end of the world. It is something we can obviously focus on this week. So these are the fixtures for this week, and if you watched the guide video from yesterday, you'll know that I'm very heavily focused on Inter Milan, Barcelona and Arsenal, because they are the 3 teams with really good home fixtures this week, and all 3 of them are essentially through to the next round. Of course, Barcelona and Inter, only winning 1-0 and 2-0 aren't, guaranteed to go through, but they are given very, very high chances by the odds. I think Barca are a 90% chance of going through, a 95% chance of going through, and Inter essentially 100 as well. So not expecting any of those teams to lose, so going hard on them with a nice fixture, and obviously a decent fixture in the quarter-final, mainly for Barcelona. Inter I think should be favourites going up against Bayern Munich in the quarters. Arsenal a little bit less with obviously Real Madrid, but that is the 3 teams that I'm going to be focusing on. Obviously 2 of those playing on Tuesday. I think Tuesday is going to be where most players have the majority of their team playing. I think 9 or 10 players for the majority of people are going to come on Tuesday, with people having Liverpool, Salah, PSG having Dembele, and then big, stacks of Inter and Barcelona players. Obviously Florian Wirtz picked up an injury as well, so he is going to be missing match day 12. So if you did have him for match day 11, you are going to have to take him out before we get into match day 12. Obviously when it comes to captaincy as well for Tuesday, for me it was going to be Lautaro Martinez, but from what I've seen this morning, it looks as though he's going to be rested. He was going to be my big differential captain and going against Lewandowski, who is going to be the big popular one. But from the looks of things, obviously we do still have to keep an eye on the Inter lineups, because that does usually get leaked before the deadline, so that should be okay, and we should have confirmation of that before we actually need to make any transfers. But it looks as though Lautaro Martinez is going to be rested for the Atalanta game on Sunday for Inter Milan, so it is most likely going to be Lewandowski who takes the captaincy on Tuesday for me. For Wednesday, a little bit more up in the air. Mbappe's an option, obviously playing against Atletico away, but it's not the best captaincy pick. Guirassi's still there for Dortmund. Again, away to Lille isn't amazing, but he can still do a job in there. Any Arsenal attackers that you do have as well could be a really good move. Even a defender could be a pretty decent captaincy pick, but obviously with the clean sheets, the defenders can often be limited to about 6 points, which, you know, isn't the highest ceiling when it comes to captaincy. So this is how my team is looking before making any transfers for this week. Now, what the original plan was to do was to heavily load up on Inter and Arsenal defenders. Now, I will pop up the clean sheet odds and the goal odds on screen right now. Again, if you want a more in-depth look into those, it's all in yesterday's guide. So it'll be linked at the end of the video, so go and watch that if you haven't already. But as you can see, Arsenal and Inter Milan are the two biggest favourites for clean sheets this week. Now, I think this week I'm just going to go heavy on those guys, get the full defence of Inter and Arsenal players, because I think I'm looking pretty decent when it comes to players going through to the next round. I think the only ones who look a little bit in danger of going out is obviously going to be Michele, but he's going to come out anyway this week. Dembele, potentially, one of Dembele or Salah, and then maybe the Dortmund players. So I think the 3 transfers this week are going to be focused on getting out Michele and probably, you know, 1 or 2 of the Dortmund players. When it comes to goal odds, of course, Barcelona are still quite high. As you just seen, they're at a 52%. I do have the 3 Barcelona attackers in there, but again, there was still some news again this morning with the potential starting of Gavi, which would mean Dani Olmo would drop to the bench. But personally, I think Dani Olmo is going to start. Again, we'll have predicted lineups and stuff before the deadline. Of course, Barcelona is the team that plays at 5:45 on Tuesday, which means we're going to get the lineups before the deadline anyway, so we can see whether Dani Olmo is going to start. I think he will, especially the fact that he got hooked so early in the first leg. I think he gets the majority of the game this time, so I'm, you know, happy enough with that. But I think this week's transfers, basically what I was going to do was take Michele out for De Vrij, take Schlotterbeck out to reduce down my Dortmund players in the case that they get knocked out. Schlotterbeck coming out for Timber, which was going to be 4.4 million, so that would have gave me the triple Arsenal defence and the triple Inter defence, and then I would have taken out Guirassy for Lautaro Martinez. I was locked in with that. It was perfect for the budget. That was going to give me the quad Inter, the triple Arsenal and the quad Barcelona, which is what was absolutely ideal for me in bringing the Dortmund players down to just Adeyemi. But obviously with the Lautaro Martinez news, it's obviously not really a plan that I can go ahead with anymore, so I'm going to have to change things up a little bit. So what it looks like is I'm still going to go ahead with Schlotterbeck and Michele coming out. De Vrij is likely to come in for me, but again, he was not in training today due to muscle fatigue. So if he's not going to be coming in, it's going to be Pavard, who looks like he's basically nailed in the Inter defence as well. Either way, it's going to be another Inter defender who does come in. And then Schlotterbeck to Saliba. He is 1 million extra than Timber is, just because he is a little bit more nailed. If I do need the budget for my third transfer, then I'll just go for Timber instead of Saliba. But, you know, I've went for Saliba with the case that he is, of course, more nailed in the 11, and we aren't going to see that Arsenal team before the deadline. Now, I do have a third transfer there still up in the air. Again, it was going to be Lautaro Martinez, but now with the team it is a little bit more of a struggle. So this is what the team is looking like with those 2 transfers being made, and obviously with a third transfer in the bank. Now, the one who I think is most likely to come out is probably going to be Adeyemi, because my 3 strikers in Mbappe, Lewandowski and Guirassy was going to be the one that did come out there, but again, he's still capable of doing something against Lille, and trying to get another striker at his price point is a little bit difficult. So he is definitely the best option at that price, and you know, it doesn't really make sense to make another striker transfer. So it would be one of the midfielders that comes out for the third transfer, and that would be either Dani Olmo, of course, if he isn't starting, or it would be Adeyemi. But Adeyemi's still on some decent form. I think he's scored in the last 3 Champions League matches, and Lille away isn't the worst fixture in the world for him. But he is still, on the chopping list of players, of the most likely player to come out. I do want to keep Dembele against Liverpool because he's obviously on fantastic form this year, and I don't want to take him out. I think he's just someone who would be coming out if they get eliminated. So he's going to stay in the team. So it is most likely going to be Adeyemi that does come out if I am going to use that third transfer. Now these are the players that are on the short list for that Adeyemi transfer. Now what I need to make sure is that I'm not just using the transfer for the sake of using the transfer, because Adeyemi is obviously very capable of getting a goal against Lille, and I don't just want to make the transfer so that it doesn't get burned. Obviously you can't carry over transfers anymore that it's not the league stage, so I would just be throwing that transfer away. But 4 players on the list is going to be Olise. He's got a difficult fixture against Leverkusen, but they obviously are essentially through to the next round already, and he has Inter Milan in the quarterfinals. We've got Merino, who's obviously a cheap midfielder, who got a goal and an assist in the away fixture against PSV, and is playing up front for Arsenal at the minute while they have no strikers available. So another nice option. I've got Çalhanoğlu at 7 million, takes the penalties for Inter. Again, Inter have a really nice fixture and are given a 100% chance of going through to the next round. He's a decent option, but whether he starts or not is another one that could be up in the air. And then I've got Dominic Szoboszlai in there. I think is just a good player to get in this week to prepare for the quarterfinals. Obviously Liverpool have PSG at home this week, so I think he could do something. Not obviously the best fixture on paper, but he's definitely capable, and they do have most likely Aston Villa in the next round, where you would want a couple of Liverpool players, and I would maybe be bringing him in anyway. So these are the 4 players kind of on the list. Again, it could mix and match the likes with Arsenal midfielders. It could be Trossard, it could be Nwaneri. I've got Merino in there for now as he is playing as the striker, but again, there's lots of good options that I could go for, and of course there is just the option of keeping Adeyemi in the squad. So as it goes right now, I think it is just playing the waiting game and seeing what happens with the team news. Again, Dani Olmo, De Vrij are both players that could change at this point, and obviously that third transfer is something I'm going to have to keep an eye out on. Of course, if Lautaro Martinez does end up in the lineup for Inter, then that just goes back to what I was. De Vrij comes in, Timber comes in, and then Guirassy comes out, and we bring in Lautaro Martinez and captain him. But we'll wait and see. Again, right now it doesn't look likely that he is going to be in the starting 11. As far as the dates are concerned, I'm not really too worried about that third transfer because I've got plenty of players playing on Tuesday at the minute. We've got Lewandowski, Salah, Rafinha, Dembele, Olmo, De Vrij, Dumfries, Bastoni and Szczesny. So that's 9 players playing on Tuesday right now. If I'm going to drop that down to, or if I'm going to put that up to 10 or keep that at 9, I'm not really too worried whether that is Adeyemi or Olmo that does come out. So that's the team at the minute. Captaincy is going to go on Lewandowski on day 1, and it's probably going to go on Guirassy on day 2 if he is going to stay in the squad. So it's pretty standard. I think a lot of people are basically going to go for that. So I'm hoping most of my points this week in terms of differentials do come from the big Arsenal and Inter defences, obviously given high chances of a clean sheet. Hoping that I can just get a full clean sweep of clean sheets there from those guys. So that's going to be the video for today. Again, make sure you follow me on Twitter for any team news that does come out, and of course my final team selection will be posted before the deadline as well. So make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you all in the next one.